"Stop," the little girl said, so softly it barely rose above the clink of crystal. "That line is a lie." In the private dining room of Le Jardin Royal, everything was built to make ordinary people whisper. The ceiling lights glowed like warm honey through cut glass. White linen lay perfectly flat, not a wrinkle in sight, as if the table itself had been ironed by money. A violinist somewhere beyond the frosted doors played a slow melody that felt expensive, the kind you hear when someone is about to be celebrated or bought. On the table, a leather folder sat open beside a fountain pen polished to a mirror shine. At the top of the page, bold numbers promised the night's purpose, a $500 million deal, inked over butter-poached lobster and 70-year-old wine. Graham Whitmore, billionaire, sat at the head of the table like he owned the air. His suit was charcoal, his cufflinks understated, his expression calm in the way only a man with multiple homes could be calm. To his right, Derek Voss, his legal advisor, all straight teeth and smooth confidence, smiled as if nothing in the world could surprise him. And to his left, Marla Kent, his CFO, watched the contract the way a hawk watches an open field. Quiet, patient, certain of what would happen next. Behind the chairs, almost blending into the soft gold wallpaper, stood Hannah Reed in a plain black uniform, hands folded, posture perfect, the kind of invisible perfection that gets praised and forgotten in the same breath. Beside her stood her daughter, Lily, 12 years old, white, small enough to look borrowed in a room like this, with blonde curls that caught the light like spun silk. She should have been at home, finishing homework, drinking cocoa, being a kid. Instead, she was here because Hannah couldn't afford a babysitter, and because rich people like their service quiet and convenient. Derek's eyes flicked toward Lily like she was a misplaced napkin. "We're on a schedule," he said, voice smooth as the wine. He tapped his watch with one finger. "Mr. Whitmore, we have 60 seconds before your counterpart's counsel joins by video." Graham lifted the pen with 2 fingers, the way you lift something that doesn't weigh anything at all. Marla slid the folder a half-inch closer, precise as a metronome. The room held its breath, not out of fear, but out of expectation. Then Lily leaned forward just enough to see the ink clearly. Her gaze locked on a paragraph printed in Japanese characters, neat, elegant, deceptively polite. She didn't look at the wine, or the lobster, or the billionaire. She looked at the words. And when she spoke, her English was small, but her Japanese was perfect, clean vowels, steady cadence, like she'd been born with it. Derek's smile twitched. Hannah's heart seemed to stop without making a sound. Graham paused midair with the pen hovering over the signature line. In that pause, one fragile second, every ounce of luxury in the room suddenly felt like a costume, because a child had just told the truth out loud, and truth doesn't care how much dinner costs. For a moment, the room did not move. Even the violin beyond the frosted doors seemed to hold a note in midair, as if the music itself was waiting to see who had permission to speak. Graham Whitmore kept the pen hovering above the signature line, his hand steady, his eyes still on the page. Derek Voss let out a small, careful breath through his nose, the kind of breath that pretended to be amused. Marla Kent shifted her gaze from the contract to Lily and back again, calculating, as if she could measure risk in ounces the way the waiter measured truffle shavings. On the table, a candle flame bent slightly when the air conditioning clicked on, and its reflection danced across the cut edges of the glasses like a warning. Derek smiled wider, but the warmth did not reach his eyes. "This is a formal document," he said, voice smooth as satin. "It is written in legal Japanese. Even native speakers get confused. It is very sweet that she wants to help, but we should not waste time." He tapped his watch again, louder this time, as if sound could push reality back into place. 60 seconds, Mr. Whitmore. Their counsel will be on the screen. If we are not signed, the window closes and the price adjusts. Hannah Reed felt the sentence land like a weight on her shoulders. She could almost hear the unspoken version. If your child makes trouble, you will lose your job. Her fingers tightened together behind her apron until her knuckles turned pale. She had polished silverware in this restaurant until she could see her own tired face in it. She had learned how to walk quietly on marble floors, how to refill water without clinking ice, how to say certainly when her feet ached. She had also learned that powerful people did not like surprises, especially surprises delivered by someone who wore a service uniform. Lily, however, did not look surprised at all. Lily looked focused. Her blue eyes stayed on that paragraph, scanning as if every character mattered. In the warm light, her blonde curls framed her face like a halo, but there was nothing soft about her attention. She had the stillness of someone listening for a truth hiding behind politeness. She had seen Japanese on menus before, on bottles of imported tea, on the spine of library books her mother could never afford to buy. She had learned it quietly, after school, with borrowed flashcards and late-night videos turned down to a whisper. Not to impress anyone, not to show off, just because words were doors, and she liked knowing where they led. Derek leaned back and gave a small chuckle, the kind that invited everyone to laugh with him so nobody had to think. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, tilting his head toward Lily without looking at her directly. "Children repeat phrases they hear. They do not understand nuance. The English summary is accurate. We drafted it." He let the last word sit there like a stamp of authority. Marla reached for the folder as if to close it, as if to trap the moment inside leather. Lily's hand rose, not touching anything, just hovering over the line as if the air above the ink was hot. "No," Lily said, calm and certain. She spoke again in Japanese, slower this time, each syllable precise, and then she looked up at Graham, meeting his gaze like an equal. "It does not say what you think it says," she continued, in clear English. "It says you agree to give up control if the other side asks. It is written politely, but it is a trap." The word trap seemed to change the temperature in the room. The candlelight still glowed, the wine still breathed in its tall glass, the silver still shone like a quiet promise, but the luxury suddenly felt brittle, like sugar on the edge of cracking. Outside the frosted doors, the violin continued, yet each note now sounded like a countdown dressed in velvet. On the far wall, a framed mirror reflected the table in perfect symmetry. Graham Whitmore at the head, Derek Voss beside him with that practiced smile, Marla Kent poised and polished, and behind them, Hannah Reed standing in a posture that said she had spent years learning how to take up as little space as possible. The mirror did not know what to do with Lily Reed, a 12-year-old girl with blonde curls and clear eyes, standing where children were not expected to stand, speaking with the calm certainty of someone reading a weather report before a storm. Derek recovered first, because men like him always did. He let out a low laugh, not loud enough to be rude, just loud enough to make the moment feel silly. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, spreading his hands as if offering reason itself, "this is precisely why we rely on our team. Japanese contracts are filled with formalities. A child can misread tone. One word can sound frightening when it is not." His gaze slid to Hannah for half a second, sharp as a needle. "And I am sure you do not want your employee causing confusion at a critical dinner." Hannah felt her throat tighten. The unspoken threat hung in the air like smoke. She took a tiny step forward, trying to reach Lily without making a scene, because making a scene was the one unforgivable sin in rooms like this. "Lily," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Please." Lily did not move. She did not look at her mother. She kept her eyes on Graham, because she understood something adults often forgot. The person holding the pen held the power, but only if he knew what he was signing. Marla leaned in, her tone clipped, professional, almost kind. "Graham, we are burning time. Their counsel is about to join. The whole room is booked. The deal is already priced. We can discuss language later." She reached toward the folder again, like she could close the problem by closing the cover. Graham did not let her. He set the pen down, slowly, as if placing it on a scale. The tiny tap of metal against wood was louder than it should have been. He looked at Lily the way he might look at a data point that did not match the forecast. "Say it again," he told her, quiet and controlled. "But say it. In English. Tell me exactly what you heard in that sentence." Derek's smile tightened at the corners. "Mr. Whitmore, with respect, this is not appropriate. We have vetted this for weeks." Graham did not even glance at him. His eyes stayed on Lily. It was the first time anyone at that table had looked at her as if she mattered. Lily swallowed once, steadying herself. "It is not about tone," she said. "It is about ownership. That sentence says you authorize a transfer of control if they claim a condition is met. It does not say they must prove it first." She lifted her finger and hovered over the line, careful not to touch. "It is written like a courtesy, but it is a lever. If you sign, They can pull it. In the silence that followed, the restaurant's air felt expensive and thin. Somewhere beyond the doors, a server rolled a cart, and the soft wheels sounded like time moving forward whether anyone agreed or not. Derek's eyes flicked to Marla, quick and almost invisible, and Hannah saw it. She did not know Japanese, but she knew that look. It was the look of people who had planned for every voice in the room, except the smallest one. In a room like this, power was not loud, it was polished. It lived in the quiet confidence of Graham Whitmore's posture, in the way the staff moved as if the air had rules, in the way the white roses on the table looked fresh enough to have been placed 5 minutes ago. The private dining room at Le Jardin Royal was no bigger than a luxury hotel suite, but it carried the weight of a whole city's ambition. The walls were paneled in pale wood that smelled faintly of lemon oil. The floor was marble, veined like frozen smoke. A silver ice bucket sat beside a bottle that cost more than Hannah Reed's monthly rent, and no one spoke about it, because people with money did not talk about money. They simply used it to soften every edge of life. Hannah stood behind Graham's chair with her hands folded, feeling the familiar pressure of being seen only when something went wrong. She could sense the staff outside the frosted doors gliding past with trays, trained to smile without showing strain, trained to pretend this was normal. For Hannah, none of it was normal. She had spent the afternoon steaming linen, aligning forks by inches, checking that every glass was spotless, because one water spot could turn into a complaint, and one complaint could turn into a lost shift, and one lost shift could turn into an empty fridge. Lily stood beside her, small and bright in the warm light, as if the room had accidentally let a piece of daylight in. She looked like she belonged in a family photo, not a contract negotiation. Yet she did not fidget, did not stare at the dessert cart, did not act like a child in a strange place. Her attention stayed locked on the paper, on the black strokes of Japanese characters that everyone else treated like decoration. Derek Voss leaned forward again, adjusting his cuff as if to remind the room he was in control of details. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, voice lowered to that careful tone meant to sound protective. "I understand caution. But this is a prestigious counterpart. If we stall, they will interpret it as bad faith. The market reacts to hesitation." He nodded toward the small tablet propped discreetly near Marla's elbow. The screen displayed a meeting request waiting to be accepted, the kind of digital doorway that could change a fortune. A soft chime sounded, gentle but insistent, like a polite knock on a locked door. Marla's expression did not change, but her fingers tightened around her water glass until the condensation smeared. "We do not need a language lesson," she murmured, more to the room than to Lily. "We need a signature." Graham's eyes drifted from the contract to Lily, then to Hannah, then back to the contract, as if he was comparing two realities that should not touch but had collided anyway. He did not raise his voice. He did not move fast. That was his kind of authority, a calm that suggested he had never had to scramble for anything in his life. "Derek," he said, "open the Japanese version on the tablet. The full version, not the summary." Derek's smile held for a fraction of a second too long. "Of course," he replied, but the word arrived with a thin edge, like metal under velvet. He tapped the screen, and for a heartbeat nothing happened. Another soft chime. Another reminder that time did not wait for anyone, not even billionaires. Hannah felt her stomach tighten. She wanted Lily to step back, to become invisible again, because invisible was safe. But Lily stayed steady, her face calm, her voice quiet, her courage sitting right there on the table with the crystal and the silver. Derek finally lifted his gaze from the tablet and let it settle on Hannah, not Lily, with a courteous expression that did not reach his eyes, and the air in the room shifted, as if the next sentence had already been sharpened. Derek Voss let the silence stretch just long enough to make it uncomfortable. Then he smiled with the kind of politeness that carried a blade. "Hannah," he said, using her first name as if he owned it. "I do not know what arrangement you have at home, but this is a professional dinner. We invited service, not spectators." His eyes flicked to Lily like she was an item left on a chair. "Is the help bringing her child to work now?" The words landed softly, wrapped in a friendly tone, but everyone in the room heard the message underneath. Know your place. Hannah felt heat rush to her face, sharp and sudden, as if the candle on the table had turned toward her. Her mouth opened, then closed again. In rooms like this, explanations sounded like excuses, and excuses sounded like weakness. She had learned that the hard way. She had learned it the first time a guest snapped their fingers at her like she was a bell. She had learned it the day a manager told her to smile more because the dining room was expensive and sadness was not on the menu. She had learned it every time she came home with aching feet and told Lily that dignity did not pay rent, but it mattered anyway. Now, under Derek's gaze, that dignity felt like a glass held too tightly. Marla Kent, the chief financial officer, did not look away. She did not flinch. She simply took a slow sip of water and set the glass down with a small click, as if the sound could punctuate the moment and move them forward. The tablet chimed again, soft and patient, like someone tapping their shoe while waiting. Graham Whitmore did not smile. He did not apologize either. He watched Derek the way a man watches a door he thought was locked. Derek continued, still calm, still courteous, still cruel in the way only polished people could be. Mr. Whitmore, you built your empire by trusting professionals. You do not let a child derail $500 million because she learned a few phrases on the internet. We have deadlines, reputations, markets. This is not a classroom. Hannah's fingers tightened behind her back until the fabric of her apron pulled. She wanted to say Lily was not trying to embarrass anyone. She wanted to say Lily was only reading what was there. She wanted to say that truth did not care about social rank. But she could already hear the consequences in her head. A quiet dismissal, a schedule with no shifts, a polite message that her services were no longer needed. The fear was not dramatic. It was practical. It smelled like an empty refrigerator and sounded like a landlord knocking. Lily's face did not collapse the way Derek expected. She did not cry. She did not shrink. She stood very still, like a lighthouse refusing to dim because someone complained about the glare. Her blonde curls caught the warm light, and her voice, when it came, was steady. I did not learn this to show off, Lily said. I learned it because words matter. And that sentence matters. Derek's smile sharpened. Sweetheart, he said, as if kindness gave him permission, you are 12. Adults handle adult things. Hannah felt her heart break in two directions at once. One piece wanting to protect Lily by pulling her back into invisibility, the other piece swelling with pride that Lily refused to disappear. Graham's gaze shifted to Lily again, and this time it was not curiosity. It was attention. The kind of attention that made even Derek pause, because in that private dining room, the person who decided what mattered was not the lawyer, not the chief financial officer, not the music, not the money, but the man who had not signed yet. Graham Whitmore looked at Lily Reed as if the room had quietly rearranged itself around her, as if the most valuable thing on the table was no longer the contract, but the unexpected clarity in a child's voice. Derek Voss noticed that shift, and for the first time his confidence wavered, not enough for anyone to call it fear, but enough for Hannah to feel it like a draft through a sealed window. Hannah kept her eyes lowered, because that was what kept her employed, but inside she was pleading with time itself to slow down. She wanted to rewind the last 30 seconds, to pull Lily back into the safe shadow behind her, to make the world simpler. Lily did not move. She stood with her shoulders squared, small in stature, but somehow steady enough to hold the attention of a billionaire. And in that stillness, a different scene flickered behind her eyes, not in the room's mirror, but in her own memory. It was the public library 3 blocks from their apartment, where the air smelled like paper and quiet hope, where the carpet was worn thin near the language section because people came there to restart their lives. Lily remembered the first time she found a Japanese grammar book with a cracked spine and a faded cover, tucked between travel guides no one checked out anymore. She had opened it the way you open a secret, careful and curious, and she had traced the characters with her finger like they were tiny puzzles. Hannah had been exhausted that day, cheeks hollow from working a double shift, but she had still smiled when Lily asked, "Can I borrow this?" Because Hannah always smiled when Lily found something that cost nothing and still felt like treasure. Lily remembered the nights at their kitchen table, the overhead light buzzing softly, the apartment heater clicking on and off, a mug of tea cooling beside her notebook. She had practiced hiragana and katakana until her hand cramped, because she liked the feeling of making order out of symbols, of turning confusion into sense. She had listened to lessons on an old phone with the volume turned low so it would not wake her mother, repeating sounds under her breath, correcting herself, trying again. Not because anyone asked her to, and not because she expected applause, but because words were one of the few things no one could take from you once you truly own them. She remembered a small used bookstore where the owner let her flip through dusty textbooks while Hannah waited outside, embarrassed to enter places that felt too quiet and too educated. The man behind the counter had once told Lily, kindly, "Keep reading, kid. Knowledge is the one thing that gets lighter the more you carry it." Lily had not forgotten that. She had carried it like a coin in her pocket, something to hold when the world felt heavy. And now, back in the private dining room, with candlelight on crystal and a $500 million agreement waiting for a signature, Lily understood why she had learned what she learned. It was not for a test. It was for a moment like this, when everyone else treated language like decoration and she could hear the truth underneath. Her gaze returned to the line on the page, and her voice did not tremble. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, respectful but firm. "If you want, I can read it word for word. I can tell you what it actually gives away." Hannah's breath caught, because she knew Lily was stepping onto a floor that did not forgive mistakes. Derek's smile reappeared, thinner now, and Marla's eyes sharpened, but Graham did not reach for the pen. He reached for certainty. Graham's request for certainty should have felt like protection, but to Hannah Reid it felt like a spotlight swinging toward the one corner of the room that was never meant to be lit. Her stomach tightened as if she had swallowed ice. In the world Hannah lived in, there were rules as real as gravity. Do not interrupt, do not contradict, do not draw attention. Those rules kept the paychecks coming. Those rules kept the lights on. Those rules kept Lily fed. Hannah could almost see tomorrow morning in her mind. The manager's polite smile, the schedule posted on the wall with her name missing, the soft sentence that sounded like kindness but meant the end. She heard her own mother's old advice like a warning. Keep your head down and you will get through it. But then she looked at Lily, and she saw something else, something Hannah had never been able to afford for herself. The ability to lift your head without begging for permission. Derek Voss leaned forward, his tone still polite, still smooth, but now threaded with impatience that did not bother to hide. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, "this is unnecessary theater. We are in the final minute. You have experts for this." He glanced at Hannah again, and this time the glance did not feel like a needle. It felt like a signature already written in invisible ink. "Hannah has been a reliable employee," he added as if complimenting her, "and I would hate for tonight to create complications for her. There are always staffing decisions." The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. Hannah felt them press against her ribs. Her throat tightened until even breathing felt loud. She took a half step toward Lily, her hand lifting, trembling slightly, not to scold her child, but to pull her back into safety. "Lily," she whispered, her voice thin. "Please, honey. Please." Lily did not turn. For 1 second, Hannah feared Lily had not heard her. Then Lily's fingers curled gently at her side, as if she was holding her own nerves in place, and she spoke without raising her voice. "Mom," she said soft, "I hear you." That was what made Hannah's eyes sting. Not defiance, not anger, just understanding. The tablet chimed again, and on its screen the video call request waited like a door that would not stop knocking. Marla Kent's posture stayed perfect, but her gaze had sharpened into something colder. "Graham," she said, measured, "we can review language after we sign. This is how deals die. This is how markets punish hesitation." Graham did not look at Marla. He looked at the contract, then at Derek, then at Lily. His calm was not kindness, but it was control, and control was the only language everyone at that table truly respected. "If the language is clean," Graham said, "then reading it costs us nothing. If it is not clean, then signing costs me $500 million. He paused, letting the number hang in the air like a weight on a thin string. Lily read the sentence, word for word. "Then tell me what it means." Hannah's heart hammered. Derek's smile froze in place, as if his face had forgotten how to move naturally. Lily stepped closer to the folder, careful, almost reverent, as if the paper could burn her if she touched it. She drew one quiet breath, the kind a singer takes before a note, and the room, for the first time that night, listened to the person everyone had tried to silence. Lily leaned over the open folder, and the candlelight slid across the ink like water over stone. The Japanese paragraph sat there in elegant characters, so formal it looked harmless, the way a smiling face can hide a hard decision. Lily began to read, not fast, not dramatic, but careful, syllable by syllable, the way someone reads aloud when they want no one to pretend they did not hear. Her pronunciation was clean and steady, the rhythm of it almost calming, even as Hannah's chest tightened with every word. Hannah watched Derek Voss out of the corner of her eye and saw his jaw flex, just once, like a door that had started to stick. Marla Kent's gaze stayed on the page, but her fingers drifted toward the tablet, as if she could rescue the night with a single tap. The tablet chimed again, and the sound now felt less like a polite request and more like a clock you could not argue with. Graham Whitmore did not move. He sat perfectly still, shoulders relaxed, eyes locked on Lily as if the room had narrowed to a single point of truth. When Lily finished reading the sentence in Japanese, she lifted her eyes and translated in plain English, each word placed carefully like a piece in a puzzle. "It says that you, Mr. Whitmore, appoint them as your representative," she began. Derek let out a soft laugh, quick and dismissive, but it fell flat in the silence. Lily continued, "It says the appointment cannot be revoked. It says it applies immediately if they say a condition is met." She pointed to the line with a fingertip hovering above the paper, never touching, as if even contact would make it real. "This part," she said, "is written like a courtesy, but it is not. It says you give them the authority to act in your name regarding voting rights and control, and you agree not to interfere." Hannah felt the floor shift under her, not literally, but emotionally, like the world tilting toward a ledge. She did not know the language, but she knew what it meant to be unable to interfere with your own life. She had lived that sentence in 100 quiet ways. Derek leaned forward, smile returning with effort. "That is an overly dramatic interpretation," he said, voice still polite, still firm. "Mr. Whitmore, this is standard in cross-border agreements. It is a procedural proxy. It is routine." Lily turned her head slightly, not toward Derek, but toward Graham, as if Derek had become background noise. "It is not routine," she said. "There is no limit written here. There is no requirement for proof written here. It says they can determine the condition themselves." Her voice did not rise, but the room seemed to tighten around it. Graham's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in focus, the way a man looks when he realizes he may have been fed a lie with silverware. "Read the clause after it," Graham said quietly. Derek's hand lifted, palm open, as if to stop the air. "Mr. Whitmore, we do not have time for this. The call is waiting. The counterpart will take offense. This is not how deals are done." Graham did not look at him. "This is how I do deals," Graham replied, calm as stone. Lily looked back down and read the next lines, and this time, even Hannah could feel the shift in the language, the way politeness sharpened into ownership. Lily swallowed once, then translated, her words landing like cold drops of water. "It says that upon their notice, you will transfer control, and you acknowledge that the transfer may include assets and authority valued up to the full amount." She lifted her eyes again. "Up to everything," she finished, and in the hush that followed, Derek Voss's smile finally stopped pretending. The silence after Lily said up to everything did not feel empty. It felt full, like a room packed with invisible witnesses. Graham Whitmore did not blink for a long moment. His gaze stayed on the line Lily had just translated, and something in his expression shifted from calm curiosity to cold clarity, the way a man looks when he realizes the floor beneath him was never meant to hold his weight. Derek Voss tried to regain control with a soft, practiced chuckle, but the sound came out thin. "Mr. Whitmore, you are hearing an emotional paraphrase," Derek said, leaning in as if closeness could blur facts. "The language is formal. It is not uncommon. We can revise wording after execution." Graham lifted one hand, not dramatic, just final, and Derek's voice stopped as if it had hit glass. The tablet chimed again, and the screen flashed the waiting video call. Marla Kent's eyes flicked to it, then back to Graham, her face still composed, but her breathing just slightly shallower, like someone keeping a tight grip on a steering wheel. Graham slid the folder an inch toward himself, careful, deliberate, then turned it so the candlelight hit the page. "At an angle. If this is routine," he said quietly, "then you will explain why the clause says the appointment cannot be revoked." Derek opened his mouth, then closed it, then smiled again with effort. "It is a translation nuance," he insisted. "It protects the counterparty from sudden interference." Lily's voice cut in, calm and precise. "It protects them from you," she said. Hannah felt her own breath catch, because Lily was not insulting anyone. She was simply telling the truth, and truth sounded sharper than any insult in a room built on polite lies. Graham's eyes moved from the clause to the top margin of the page. "This header," he said, more to himself than anyone else, "looks different." He tapped the paper once with a fingertip. "Lily, look at the formatting. Is this the same as the earlier draft?" Lily leaned closer, studying the page the way she had studied books at the library, not with fear, but with focus. "The spacing is different," she said. "The numbering is different. And this symbol here," she added, pointing to a small mark near the corner, "is not the same. It is like a reference stamp." Derek's eyes darted to the corner so quickly Hannah almost missed it. Marla's fingers tightened around her glass again. Graham reached for the tablet and, with a few controlled taps, pulled up the digital copy displayed there. The glow lit his face from below, turning the polished room into something stranger, like a confession booth for money. He scrolled, then stopped, then scrolled again. His voice stayed level, but the air around it changed. "The clause Lily read is here," he said, "but it is not in the version my office approved last week." Derek's smile cracked at the edges. "Mr. Whitmore, there are often late-stage edits," he said quickly. "Minor adjustments. Standard practice." Graham looked up. "Then you will show me the revision history," he said. Derek's throat moved in a swallow. Marla leaned forward, her tone careful. "Graham, this is becoming public in a way it does not need to. We can handle it internally." Graham did not look at her. He looked at Derek. "Internally is how people get robbed," he said, still quiet, still controlled. He tapped the tablet again, and the screen displayed a small detail, a timestamp in the corner, recent enough to make Hannah's stomach drop. "This was uploaded tonight," Graham said. "Not last week. Not yesterday. Tonight." Derek's hands lifted in a gesture meant to soothe, but it only made him look more guilty. "We were aligning language," he said. "We were protecting you." Lily's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in logic. "If it was protection," she said softly, "why did you hide it in Japanese?" And in that moment, the private dining room did not feel like a celebration anymore. It felt like a trap that had just failed to close. Graham did not raise his voice, but the room still felt like it had been commanded to stand at attention. He reached across the table, turned the tablet toward himself, and with one deliberate tap, he declined the incoming video call. The soft chimes stopped mid-rhythm, and the sudden quiet was so complete that Hannah could hear the faint hiss of a candlewick and the distant murmur of the dining room outside, where other people laughed without realizing a fortune had just been rescued from a hidden snare. Derek Voss blinked, then forced a smile that looked painted on. "Mr. Whitmore, you just insulted them," he said, trying to sound concerned, trying to sound like a protector of reputation. "This will have consequences." Graham set the tablet down as if it was no heavier than a coaster. "I will survive their feelings," he replied, his tone calm enough to make it terrifying. His eyes cut back to the contract. "I might not survive your paperwork." Marla Kent leaned in, her voice low, measured, as if she could soothe the moment back into a neat corporate narrative. "Graham, you are reacting to a misunderstanding," she said. "We can have counsel review this quietly. Tonight does not need to become dramatic." Graham finally looked at her, and the warmth in the room seemed to drain just a little. "Quietly is how people steal," he said. "Silence is not a strategy. It is an invitation." Derek's smile tightened. "You are letting a child dictate a transaction," he insisted, his tone sharpening with desperation. "This is irrational." Lily did not flinch, but Hannah felt her own knees soften, as if her body wanted to sit down from the sheer pressure of being watched. Graham did not look at Lily to reassure her, because he did not need to. His actions were reassurance. He opened the folder again, tapped the timestamp Lily had helped him notice, then looked toward the frosted doors. "Excuse me," he called, not loud, just clear. The door opened at once. The maitre d' appeared, face composed, eyes alert, trained to manage chaos without letting the room see sweat. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." Graham's voice stayed level. "I need my head of security here now," he said. "And I need this room secured. No one takes any documents, tablets, or phones out of here until my general counsel arrives." The maitre d' nodded once, already moving, already obeying, because money was power but certainty was authority. Derek's posture stiffened. That is unnecessary, he said quickly. You cannot detain people. Graham's gaze did not waver. I am not detaining you, he said. I am documenting you. There is a difference. He turned back to Derek, eyes steady as cold water. You will email my counsel every draft, every revision, every message connected to this deal. You will provide the edit history and the upload logs. You will do it tonight. Derek's throat moved as he swallowed. Mr. Whitmore, he began, still trying to sound polite, still trying to regain footing. You are making a mistake. Graham paused, then spoke with a quiet finality that made Hannah's eyes sting. The mistake would have been signing, he said. He glanced at Hannah then, for the first time not as background but as a human being. Hannah Reed, he said, and she nearly startled at hearing her name spoken without contempt. Your job is safe. Your daughter is not in trouble. She just saved me from losing $500 million. Hannah's breath hitched, and Lily's face held steady, but her eyes brightened with something like relief, like permission to finally exhale. Derek opened his mouth again, but the door behind them opened a second time, and the sound of calm footsteps in the hallway made his confidence crumble the way sugar does when it meets heat. The footsteps in the hallway were not rushed, but they carried weight, the quiet certainty of people who did not need to announce themselves to be taken seriously. The door opened, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped in with the maitre d', his posture calm, his eyes scanning the room the way a professional scans for exits and intentions. Behind him came a woman with a slim briefcase and a winter coat draped over her arm, her hair pulled back, her expression sharp with focus. Graham Whitmore did not stand. He simply nodded once, the kind of nod that moved entire teams. Marcus Hale, the security chief said, voice low. Elaine Porter, the general counsel said, already setting her briefcase on the sideboard like she had done it 1,000 times. Derek Voss tried to smile again, but it looked like his face had forgotten the shape of confidence. This is excessive, Derek said, keeping his tone polite, as if politeness could erase a timestamp. We are discussing drafts. That is all. Elaine Porter did not answer him. She looked at the contract, at the tablet, at the waiting email notifications on the screen, and then at Lily Reed, standing in her mother's shadow with the steadiness of someone who had just watched adults pretend not to understand a language they used as camouflage. Show me the version your office approved, Elaine said to Graham. Graham slid his own phone across the table. This is the approved copy, he replied. And this, he added, turning the tablet so Elaine could see, is what appeared tonight. Elaine did not gasp. She did not perform shock. She simply compared, line by line, the way a judge compares signatures. The clause is inserted, she said at last. Irrevocable appointment. Unilateral trigger. No proof requirement. Control transfer language. She looked up, her gaze landing on Derek like a courtroom light. Who uploaded this? Marla Kent, the chief financial officer, held her composure like a shield. We were aligning translations, she said evenly. We were preventing ambiguity. Elaine tapped the corner mark Lily had noticed. This stamp is from an internal document platform, she said. It logs user identification. Marcus, I need the device. Now. Marcus Hale stepped forward, open-handed, not aggressive, simply inevitable. Phones and tablets on the table, he said, the way someone says please when please is not optional. Derek hesitated just long enough for everyone to see he wanted to refuse. Then he placed his phone down with 2 fingers, as if it might burn him. Marla followed, slower, her chin lifted. Marcus collected them and handed them to Elaine, who plugged a small connector into the tablet and began pulling logs. In the candlelit hush, the only sound was the faint click of a keyboard, and the distant murmur of the dining room beyond the frosted doors, where people still believed dinner was only dinner. Hannah Reed stared at the marble floor, feeling her pulse in her throat. Lily stood close enough that Hannah could feel the warmth of her child through the fabric of her uniform, and for the first time all night, Hannah did not try to push her away from attention. Elaine looked up. Upload occurred at 8:42 p.m., she said. User, Marla Kent. Marla did not blink, but a thin line appeared at the corner of her mouth, the first crack in her control. Derek turned toward her, eyes wide for a fraction of a second, then forced his gaze back to Graham, as if loyalty could be rewritten as confusion. Graham exhaled once, slow, and the room felt colder in a clean, clarifying way. Marcus, he said, Escort Mr. Voss and Miss Kent to a separate room. Elaine, contact the proper authorities and begin preservation of evidence. He looked at Hannah and Lily again, and this time his voice softened without losing strength. Hannah Reed, you and your daughter will leave through the kitchen so no one bothers you, he said. And tomorrow morning, my office will call you. Not about shifts. About opportunities. Hannah's eyes stung, not from humiliation now, but from the strange shock of being treated like a person in the same sentence as power. Lily looked up at her mother, then back at Graham, and gave a small nod, as if to say she understood what her mother had always tried to teach her. Dignity did not require permission. As Hannah guided Lily toward the door, the scent of lemon polish followed them into the hallway. And for the first time in a long time, Hannah felt the world tilt, not toward a ledge, but toward a morning that might finally belong to them. Hannah Reed guided Lily through the kitchen corridor where the light was brighter and less forgiving, where stainless steel reflected every movement and the air smelled of bread, soap, and hot water instead of perfume and wine. The staff glanced up as they passed, and Hannah expected the usual judgment, the silent question of why a child was there. But what she saw instead was something rarer, quiet respect, the kind that travels faster than gossip when a powerful room changes its mind. Outside the back door, the night air felt cool and honest. The city sounded different away from the velvet hush of Le Jardin Royal, less like a performance and more like life, with distant traffic and a faint siren far enough away to be only a reminder that the world did not pause for anyone. Hannah kept one hand on Lily's shoulder as they walked to the bus stop, not because Lily needed guidance, but because Hannah needed to confirm that her daughter was real, that the courage she had witnessed was not a dream that would evaporate under streetlights. Lily did not brag. She did not replay the moment with dramatic words. She simply looked up at her mother and said, I did not want you to lose your job. Hannah swallowed hard and answered the only truth she could manage. You did not, she said. You protected it. At home, their apartment was small, but it felt warmer than it had in months, as if the walls had absorbed a new kind of possibility. Hannah made tea, then sat at the kitchen table while Lily did homework as usual, pencil scratching softly, curls falling into her eyes. The normal routine should have made the night feel less important, but it did the opposite. It proved that extraordinary dignity could live inside an ordinary life. Hannah lay awake long after Lily fell asleep, listening to the heater click and the refrigerator hum, thinking about how easily a polished insult could have crushed her child, and how Lily had stood steady anyway. By morning, the winter light came in thin and pale through the blinds, and Hannah was halfway through packing a lunch when her phone rang. She nearly dropped it, because phones usually brought bad news. This time the voice on the line was calm, professional, and unmistakably respectful. It was Elaine Porter from Graham Whitmore's office, asking if Hannah could come in that afternoon, not to explain herself, not to apologize, but to talk about what came next. Hannah arrived in the lobby of Whitmore Holdings with Lily beside her, both of them wearing their best clothes, both of them trying not to look impressed by the glass walls and quiet security. Graham met them in a conference room that smelled faintly of lemon polish, just like the restaurant, but here the scent did not feel like a warning. It felt like cleanliness, like a blank page. He did not offer speeches. He offered solutions. Hannah would have a new position with stable hours and benefits through his foundation, work that did not require her to disappear to be tolerated. Lily would receive a scholarship to a school that supported languages and advanced learning, along with a mentor who would treat her curiosity as a gift, not a nuisance. Graham looked at Lily and spoke with the same steadiness he used in boardrooms, but with something gentler in his eyes. You did not save me because you wanted attention, he said. You saved me because you understood the value of a sentence. Lily nodded, serious, and answered simply, words are not decorations. Graham smiled then, small and real. When Hannah and Lily left the building later, the city felt unchanged, but they were not. Hannah realized that the greatest luxury in those marble rooms had never been the wine or the contracts. It was the choice to listen. And sometimes, the person worth listening to was the one the world tried hardest to overlook. Weeks passed, and the city kept shining the way it always did. But for Hannah Reed, the light felt different now, less like something reserved for penthouses and more like something that could reach a small kitchen table. The headlines about the abandoned deal came and went in the business pages, framed as a sudden change in strategy, a mysterious delay, a quiet shift in leadership, but the truth lived in the details that never made print. The upload logs, the hidden clause, the polished smiles that had almost rewritten ownership with a single signature. Graham Whitmore did not speak about it in interviews, because he did not need attention for doing the right thing, but he changed the way his company handled language after that night. Every international contract was audited by independent translators, every revision tracked, every late edit flagged, not because it was fashionable, but because he had learned that the most dangerous lies are the ones that arrive wearing manners. For Hannah, the change was even more personal. Her new role at the foundation came with steady hours and health coverage, and the steady paycheck felt like someone finally turned the volume down on fear. She no longer had to choose between exhaustion and groceries, or between pride and rent. She still worked hard, but she no longer had to vanish to be tolerated. Lily's world opened in quieter, brighter ways. The scholarship placed her in classrooms where curiosity was treated like a strength, where teachers asked follow-up questions instead of rolling their eyes, where her Japanese was not a party trick but a skill. On her first day, she walked into the language lab and saw a wall of books that looked like doors, and for a second she held her breath, the way she had in the library years ago, except now no one acted like she did not belong there. One afternoon, months later, Hannah and Lily were invited back to Whitmore Holdings, not for ceremony, not for cameras, but for a simple lunch in a sunlit conference room. The table was plain wood, the water glasses ordinary, and the room smelled faintly of lemon polish, clean and calm. Graham greeted them without an entourage, just a quiet nod and a warm plate of food ordered from a local diner he said he liked because it did not pretend. He asked Lily what she was reading. She told him about a novel translated from Japanese, how certain words could not be carried over perfectly, how meaning lived in what you chose to preserve. Graham listened the way powerful people rarely listen, not waiting for his turn, not performing interest, but actually absorbing the shape of another person's thoughts. Then he turned to Hannah and said, as if stating a truth he had finally earned, "I spent years believing risk lived in numbers. That night, I learned it can live in a sentence, and the bravest voice in the room might belong to someone people dismiss." Hannah looked at Lily and felt the kind of gratitude that is almost too large to hold, because it was not only that Lily had saved money. Lily had saved something that was harder to measure, her mother's dignity, her own future, and a small corner of the world that might now be a little less cruel to the unseen. On the way home, Lily pressed her forehead to the bus window and watched the city slide by, storefronts and streetlights, and ordinary people carrying ordinary burdens. Hannah took her daughter's hand and realized the lesson she would carry forever was simple and quiet. True worth does not announce itself with titles or tailor-made suits. It speaks plainly, even when the room tries to laugh, and it shines brightest when someone chooses to listen.